If you close your eyes and you place your attention on your heart, and you can keep it on your heart and feel it and experience it and pay attention to it, we see from the technology that we built, in time, and not a very long amount of time, just a few minutes, you'll start to see this very low frequency of the heart start going up, which means you can slow your breathing down. When you slow your breathing down, you slow your brainwaves down. We've measured that thousands of times. Like, what emotion do you want to feel when a future experience happens? Whatever that is. Feel the gratitude, feel the joy, feel the freedom, and breathe and feel and breathe, and keep relaxing into your heart, keeping your attention nowhere else out of the millions of things you can put your attention on. There'll come a moment where that energy will naturally start moving up to the brain, and when that happens, the survival centers shut down, brain moves into alpha, you see more in pictures and images, and it's telling the brain to be creative, to dream, to be unlimited. Can I teach my body emotionally what my future will feel like before it happens? People need a rush of dopamine in order to catch their attention, or a rush of adrenaline to learn. And so that they're dependent on their outer environment to regulate their emotional state. Now, this is different now. Now, I'm going to say to you, get in that beautiful heart of yours, and I want you to feel gratitude for the event before it occurs. Well, I can't feel it because it hasn't happened yet. Yeah, that's the conditioning. That's the hypnosis. So then when you teach people how to create heart coherence and self-regulate, then it makes sense then with a coherent brain, they can hold the image of their future. They can actually then rehearse who they're going to be. They can bring up the emotions of their future. Now, here's the cool part. If they can feel their gratitude before their healing begins. If they feel their abundance or their worthiness before they have their wealth, it will start generating abundance. If they start being in love with themselves and being in love with life, they'll create an equal. That's the law. If they're in awe of life or in awe of the moment, they're going to have a mystical experience. If they're empowered, they're going to start stepping towards their success. So then when we wait for the outer world to change our internal state, that's a conditioning process, because some people will live in lack and separation their entire life because they're not creating anything. When this happens, then I'll feel happy. That's the illusion of three-dimensional reality. That's cause and effect, but feeling the emotion ahead of the experience is causing an effect. So the heart, when it's coherent, tends to produce an external magnetic field that's up to 3 meters wide. Now you got a Wi-Fi signal. Now when you have a coherent brain, the brain could actually lay the information on that signal. And the thought of your wealth or your health can be carried on the frequency of that heart emotion. Emotions are the end product of an experience, right? Epigenetics says it's the environment that signals the gene. If the environment signals the gene and the end product of an experience in the environment is an emotion, that person's signaling genes ahead of the environment. And now they're biologically believing, behaving, and actually becoming that person. So if the person sustains that state, and we look at novice meditators that come for a week, and 90% of them, and the metabolites, not just a few, the majority of the metabolites in novice meditators suggest that their body's in a different life. One of the keys to breaking the habit of being yourself is working toward being more observant, whether that entails being more metacognitive, monitoring your thoughts, embracing stillness, or focusing more attention on your behaviors and how elements in your environment might trigger emotional responses. So the big question here is, how do you do all this? In other words, how do you become more observant, break your emotional bonds with the body, the environment, and time, and close the gap? The answer is simple: meditation. You may have noticed that, up to this point, I have teased you with brief allusions to meditation as the way to break the habit of being yourself and begin to create a new life as your ideal self. When I use the term meditation, an image of a person seated cross-legged in front of a shrine at home, a bearded and gowned yogi sitting in a secluded cave in the Himalayas, or some other visual may come to mind. That individual may be a representation of what you understand is the way to go quiet, empty the mind, focus all of one's attention on a thought, or engage in any of the other variations of the practice of meditation.
There are a lot of meditative techniques, but my wish is to help you produce the most desirable benefit of meditation, being able to access and enter the operating system of the subconscious mind so that you move away from simply being yourself and your thoughts, beliefs, actions, and emotions, observing those things. And then once you're there, to subconsciously reprogramming your brain and body to a new mind. When you move from unconsciously producing thoughts, beliefs, actions, and emotions, and take control of them through the conscious application of your will, you can unlock the chains of being your old self to become a new self.
We teach people this. As they start breaking through and they start being able to unfold into this field as an awareness, and they're not putting their attention on their boss or their ex or their wife or their kids or their cell phone or their WhatsApp or their Facebook, they're not thinking at all. So then, as they're sensing the space, they can't think. And if you can't think, you can't analyze. And if you can't analyze, the analytical mind is what separates the conscious mind from the subconscious. We just open the door.
Wow.
And so now you can reprogram in there, right? So then, it's so important then that of the infinite places you can put your attention, let's put it on your heart. Now, where you place your attention is where you place your energy. Why? Because we want this center to bloom. 1,400, 1,300 different chemicals that restore and regenerate the body. Let's breathe. Let's open this up. Let's practice this. Let's start learning how to lead with our heart. A different consciousness. Yeah, in the beginning, it's a little difficult, but you stay with it and you practice it. Pedal by pedal by pedal, you're placing your attention there, you're putting your own life force back into your heart, you're turning your love inward, and the body will start responding. And in a week's time, if we're doing that 3 times a day or over and over again, sooner or later that thing's going to start blooming. And just like when your sexual organs are aroused and they're engorged with blood, this center, when you start feeling love, you make a chemical called oxytocin. Oxytocin signals nitric oxide. Nitric oxide signals a chemical called derived endothelial relaxing factor. You know what that is? It causes the arteries in your heart to literally open up. So your heart is going to be filled with blood and oxygen and nutrients. It's physiological. It's going to feel full. You're going to have a heart-on, in a sense. Your heart is going to fill, right? And when that happens, you experience a level of love that passes all understanding. Your cup runneth over. I mean, it is, and people they're sobbing because they realize that this center finally, like a child.
In the Tibetan language, to meditate means to become familiar with. Accordingly, I use the term meditation as a synonym for self-observation as well as self-development. After all, to become familiar with anything, we have to spend some time observing it. Again, the key moment in making any change is going from being it to observing it. Another way to think of this transition is when you go from being a doer to a doer-watcher. An easy analogy I can use is that when athletes or performers, golfers, skiers, swimmers, dancers, singers, or actors want to change something about their technique, most coaches have them watch videotape of themselves. How can you change from an old mode of operation to a new one unless you can see what old and new look like? It's the same with your old and your new self. How can you stop doing things one way without knowing what that way looks like? I frequently use the term unlearning to describe this phase of changing. This process of becoming familiar with the self works both ways. You need to see the old and the new self. You have to observe yourself so precisely and vigilantly, as I've described, that you won't allow any unconscious thought, emotion, or behavior to go unnoticed. Since you have the equipment to do this because of the size of your frontal lobe, you can look at yourself and decide what you want to change in order to do a better job in life. Decide to stop being the old you. When you can become conscious of those unconscious aspects of the old habituated self rooted in the operating system of the subconscious, you are beginning the process of changing anything about yourself. What steps do you normally take when you get serious about doing something differently? You separate yourself from your external world long enough to think about what to do and not do. You start becoming aware of many aspects of the old self, and you begin to plan a course of action related to a new self. For example, if you want to become happy, the first step is to stop being unhappy. That is, stop thinking the thoughts that make you unhappy, and stop feeling the emotions of pain, sorrow, and bitterness. If you desire to become wealthy, you'll probably decide to stop doing the things that make you poor. If you want to be healthy, you'll have to stop living an unhealthy lifestyle. These examples are to show you that first, you have to make the decision to stop being the old you to such a degree that you make room for a new personality, thinking, acting, and doing. Therefore, if you eliminated stimuli from your external world by closing your eyes and becoming quiet, decreasing your sensory input, putting your body in a state of stillness, and no longer focusing on linear time, you could become aware solely of how you are thinking and feeling. And if you began to pay attention to your unconscious states of mind and body and became familiar with your automatic unconscious programs until they became conscious, would you be meditating? The answer is yes. To know thyself is to meditate. If you are no longer being that old personality, but instead are noticing different aspects of it, wouldn't you agree that you are the consciousness observing the programs of that past identity? In other words, if you consciously observe the old self, you are no longer being it. As you go from being unaware to being aware, you are beginning to objectify your subjective mind. That is, by your paying attention to the old habit of being you, your conscious participation begins to separate you from those unconscious programs and give you more control over them. By the way, if you are successful in consciously restraining those routine states of mind and body, then nerve cells that no longer fire together no longer wire together. As you prune away the neurological hardware of the old self, you also no longer signal the same genes in identical ways. You are breaking the habit of being you.
We've done studies with novice meditators, and we were curious to see what kind of biological changes would take place in 1 week if you went all in. We draw blood, and we look at about 2,882 metabolites. And at the end of 7 days, the novice meditators, almost 100% of them, show substantial biological changes in their blood that suggest that they're living in a different environment. Now, here's the weird part about it. They're in a ballroom. They're actually making those changes inwardly. And I say to our research team, where are those chemicals coming from?